And indeed, it has been described as Kenya's most divisive election, very divisive indeed, and the country's most polarized electioneering period, which has been very protracted, starting from the 8th of August, going all the way to the 1st of September, when the Supreme Court, in a historic ruling, did nullify the results of 8th of August and ordered a new election in 60 days. And today, it's exactly 60 days since that decision by the Supreme Court. And President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was essentially running a solo run in the presidential election, was declared winner with 7.4 million votes. That is about 38.27% of the vote. That's historic indeed. And to help us discuss the events of the day, the last 60 days, and the next 5 years, my panel, starting from the left, we do have Professor Macharia Munene, Miguna, Scheaffer Okore. To my right, we do have Charles Kanjama, Olga Karani, and finally Gabriel Muthuma. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Right, let's start with what we've seen today. President Uhuru Kenyatta picking the winner's certificate, 98%. Nobody has ever been elected this way since 1988. Let's start with Professor Munene, your reaction.
It's a big win for Uhuru. What we have witnessed is one election in two parts. And the second part, Part B, simply confirmed Part A. The August election that was nullified for strange reasons, but it was nullified. And then the court ordered a fresh one, which was conducted, this time simply confirming what was done in August. So it is unique in that sense.
And a big win for Uhuru, you say?
Yeah, it's a big win for Uhuru.
Right, thank you very much.
And I think for the country also.
Thank you. Miguna?
Linus, let me say that the bad news is that this is a grotesque debauchery of democracy. Democracy has been scandalized and debased in Kenya. Those numbers that you are citing are not numbers that even despots like Museveni and Kagame can rival. Those are not the numbers of Mugabe. Those are the numbers of absolute despots.
But the IBC says, Miguna, the IBC says these are the numbers of votes that Uhuru Kenyatta garnered.
So let me tell you, first of all, your introduction was good. You said it was a solo run. So he got 98 against himself. So that's the bad news. The bad news is that our democracy and the constitution has been subverted. The good news is that the clash exposes the rots and the determination of this despotic duo to roll our gains back. It will steal the determination of the people to remove them from power. So from tomorrow, you are going to see now what I call real politics.
And we're going to go into that in a short while, looking at tomorrow and beyond. But before that, we are discussing the result itself, 98% for Uhuru Kenyatta. Scheaffer?
I think most importantly, the struggle has just begun. And the struggle has just seriously begun. Because context is, when we say we are affirming the election of the 8th of August, an election that was termed void, meaning there was no election, there was nothing to affirm. We were told go back, and then you come back again, and it's the same procedure, and it is the same way, and with the same people, and then you talk about a win. I am not belittling the people who participated. I understand that is their right. What I am talking about is the fact that we don't seem to realize that the country spoke, and I keep repeating it, Kenya spoke in this election more than they even spoke in August, because they said it is okay for you to want to do what you want to do, but not with my vote.
You say
not with my
Kenyan
voice.
spoke, Scheaffer, and
Yes.
you're saying nothing about the 7.4 million votes.
I'm saying that specifically, and I'm sorry to cut you short. I'm saying that specifically because we have seen these numbers move from 48% to now we are 38%, and we could not use Kim's kits to identify or to quantify or to even verify the number of people who are coming out to vote. It's a problem because numbers were not tallying, right? And it even took longer to get these numbers out in the public from the first moment when they started streaming in. It's a problem.
Thanks. We'll come back to the issue of tallying. Let's go to Charles. We are sticking to Bomas. President Uhuru Kenyatta, 7.4 million votes.
Yeah, I think, Linus, for the supporters of Jubilee, the win which has been declared by IBC again reaffirms what they believe, that Uhuru had the numbers, that he won, that his win has been confirmed, and they hope that this time the Supreme Court will not overturn the will of Kenyans. And for the supporters of NASA, they think this is a charade part 2. They hope the Supreme Court will once again overturn this charade of IBC, and that we can prolong this exercise and have fresh elections in 90 days. So we are, it's like Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities. It's a story in two halves. And it seems that it's a never-ending story, where with every passing installment of the story, the narratives get entrenched by each side, and we keep wondering who will prevail at the end of the day.
I don't mean to preempt your thoughts. You spoke of a story of two halves. Is this the final half?
For the Jubilee side, they hope it is the final half. And for NASA, they hope this is the second term in a 3-term installment.
Thank you. Olga, we're talking 98% of the vote. The highest ever by any president since we last got rid of the system of running unopposed, and that was in 1988.
Exactly. The highest because it never was. There was nothing called 98%. In fact, all Kenyans know that these elections, the people that turned out to vote were less than 20%. Everywhere, including Gatundu and Tarbo. Everywhere in Kenya. So, as far as I'm concerned, these elections were a disgrace, especially to Jubilee and to the people of Kenya who even imagined that something like this happened. However, they say that the darkest moment means that dawn is just in sight. The greatest news is this: after today, Kenyans will now fight for their pure liberation. And I'm so excited that Jubilee has sunk itself below and below that. You know, there are things in this world that have words. What has happened today does not have any definition, and no one wants to talk about it. All I want now is to tell Kenyans it is our opportunity 50 years down the road to fight and to stand for our real independence. So there was nothing called election.
There's something you just said there, Ogla. You said 20% when referring to the voter turnout. Where are you getting 20% from? Because we have 38% from the IBC.
I'm getting 20% from the conversations that we had with people and the experiences that we had. I, for one, voted in my house, but at some point, I went out to see. I even drove along Banana and Limuru. There was nobody who was voting.
But how do you convert a conversation to percentages?
No, what has Jabukati used? Has he used any figure? He has just converted imaginations. So we are just using what we know. I talk to people in Eldoret and in everywhere in this country. I talk to people in Nandi, in Kericho. I talk to people in my own village. Nobody left their houses to vote, even your own village in Kajiado. They actually, you know, if you media were going to table for us the figures that you have, and I know you have, which is not even necessary for the people of Kenya. We know very well that what was read today at Bomas was tripled from the real facts. So as far as I'm concerned, even my party leader, my President Raila, was very generous to make it 35%. It was not even 20%.
Right. Gabriel, Ogla next to you is calling this just numbers. She is falling short of calling it fiction.
worse than fiction. It has no definition.
You know, Olga has used two things. All Kenyans didn't vote. I think that's not only erroneous, it's disingenuous. But let me begin by the quote of the great Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius, who said, "If it's not true, don't say it. If it's not true, don't say it." There are figures that we've seen that affirm the fact that Uhuru was elected. They are not coming from me, and surely they are not coming from Olga or any of us seated in this panel. They are coming from a commission. But how did we arrive to what we saw today? We must be alive to that fact. Some day around September, we were given a directive by the Supreme Court, go do an election. Whenever the election, was supposed to happen, we were not, geared to be in the commission, but we went with the directive. We went out to vote. And immediately everybody has gone out to vote. We were given the numbers. It's not for us here to talk about the percentages. We are just reading things on top of our heads. They are coming from somewhere. If you are going to talk about numbers that have been relayed to Kenyans, all right, let them come from somewhere. If you want to investigate where those numbers come from.
That's a question I want to ask you, Gabriel.
Yeah.
The numbers you're defending, the same.
I'm not defending.
They must come from somewhere.
They are coming from somewhere, and they've come from IEBC. Who are we, me and Olga and the rest on this panel, to question those numbers? Did we have our own agents on all 290 constituencies? Did we? Then, why are you telling me? And you asked Olga a very good question. Why is she getting her 20%? Me, the numbers that I've seen, I'm just actually reporting facts that you also, your media house, reported from IEBC. Simple. Your question is very simple. So what we saw is that Uhuru was given a win, period.
Right. Let me come back to Professor Macharia Munene, and I want to wind up actually on the issue of numbers, because the IEBC has spoken 7.4 million votes for President Uhuru Kenyatta. That is constituting 98.27% of the valid votes cast. But we've seen some inconsistencies in the run-up to the announcement of the final result. And the first inconsistency was about the numbers as reported by the Kim's kit to the numbers as reported by the chairperson of the IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, who said that initially 48%, 6.5 million people having voted by 5 p.m. How did this end up being 7.4 million?
I think Chebukati has admitted that he pre-spoke before he had everything on his hands.
That's a new word, Professor.
So
pre-spoke.
He pre-spoke. So therefore he ended up confusing himself and confusing a lot of people. So we go by the numbers, the ones verified in Form 34A and confirmed in 34B, and then tabulated, added up all those ups until it ended up to 34C. So what the IBC has given that can be verified, everybody can go and see, here it is what we go by. Those others are imaginations. And Chebukati has a right to pre-speak, and he did. So I think that's where all these things are coming from. But the bottom line is the final figures, as announced, as verified at every stage. Are they valid or not? And the answer is that they are valid. Now, whether we like it or not, Kenyans voted. Whether we like it or not, Chief Justice Maraga and his team.
But the question which Olga is raising there is, did 7.4 million Kenyans vote?
Yes, more than that. Not just 7, more than 7.4 million people voted, because almost 78,000 voted for Raila, although he didn't want to be voted for. They said, no, he's a candidate, so they voted for him. All the others, in fact, he was number 2 to Uhuru. Now, had he probably put his mind to it properly, he would have got more than that. He would not have won, but he would have got more than that. So that, you see, the mistake that Raila made.
Now, before you go to that, because I just want to take it around this panel to discuss the issue of numbers and the numbers of votes that were actually cast. And I want to give this opportunity to each panelist before we now move to substantial matters of the day, like the speech by Uhuru Kenyatta. Let's go to Miguna. Miguna, we're talking the numbers.
Linus, I'm surprised that Professor Munene is a professor. Because what he calls pre-speech is actually in philosophy currently called post-truth, which means it is not truth. But philosophically, that's what it is called. But let's deal with the numbers, because as a professor, you cannot run away from facts. The fact is, I was with you, Linus, and many of the panelists here on Thursday when Mr. Chebukati announced those numbers. So at the beginning, he said, as you have said, that 6.5 people turned out and voted. That's what he said, the turnout. Then later on, and he gave that as 48% of the registered voters. He said that after 6 p.m. at the close of polling, which is when you get turnout. He came back at about, after 9 o'clock, it was about 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. And he said, based on a revised figure, because that was the best estimate, he now says he scaled down his figures to 33%. Remember, CNN, and they are present in Kenya, and they were walking around the polling stations, gave their best estimate at 27%. So this thing is between Olga's number of 20 and Chebukati's original number of 33. It is cascading in between.
His original number was actually 48%.
No, he scaled it down. So
Yes.
I'm using the number that he scaled down. He corrected himself. So I would rather rely on his
So he
correction.
corrected himself.
No. But let me just finish, please. He corrected himself by saying these are the people as identified by Kim Skits. Now, if you recall, the reason why technology was introduced in this election was for certainty and verification, is to make the election tamper-proof. Now, Kim Skits do not necessarily only capture the biometrics. When I voted at Cheleta Primary School in Runda, actually my biometrics, and there is nothing wrong with my hands, were not captured. The Kim Skits refused to work. They had to take my passport number and manually enter. Everybody who is a registered voter is in the Kim Skits. If any voter's identification cannot be found in the Kim Skit, that person is not a voter. So you either find it biometrically or you find it manually. Apparently, according to Chebukati, and this is where I find it puzzling, he says between 4 p.m. and sometime around 6, more than 4.5 million people voted, but they only voted manually. Is there anybody, even in Mathare Hospital, who can believe that? Only Chebukati can believe that.
Scheaffer?
I think there's a lot of inconsistencies, and one thing that has to come very, very clearly out for the chairman is that he doesn't have the luxury to misspeak, like it is being said. And so a friend of mine said that yesterday, and I thought that is so brilliant, because the misspeaking of him around these results and around relaying of numbers, of even following up on turnout. I remember people asking for how many voters turned out to vote, how many voters turned out to vote every single time, and those numbers are not coming in. Yet we expected this to not go, not go south in regards to it being difficult to even get this kind of a number, right? Like, first of all, it was just hard to even know how many people turned out to vote. Then even when we got to know how many people turned out to vote, according to their numbers, it was above and beyond the number of votes that were, you're wondering, how does this happen? Because we are here because we questioned the fact that A and B did not necessarily lead us to C. And we are in the same spot again. It does not make sense. Because we are questioning the fact that what you just said, between an hour, a couple million people voted. But between 8 a.m. or 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning when polling stations were opened to that 4 o'clock in the evening, only a couple million who were, I think, 4, and then the remaining part was a bulge of vote. This is crazy. Because we can't do maths like this. We can't. And then we are wondering why the rest of the country is completely disenfranchised by the fact that the same system that led us to an annulled election is the same system that has got us to another one. And people are not supposed to basic things we cannot verify through KIMS. Then why are we even spending 12 billion? Why? You know? We have to actually even go and find people manually. And then now these manual people are the majority of voters. Really, it doesn't make sense. In a country where we already don't trust each other, we don't trust people who hold these positions, it's a problem.
And you're raising trust issues on the numbers. Let me check with the right-hand side here. Charles, Scheaffer is talking of the mathematics not adding up. Do you have issues with what you've heard today from the IBC?
Linus, I think Kenyans had legitimate concerns because there were several statements by Chairman Chebukati and at one point in time by Mr. Gulie about the numbers, and they seemed inconsistent. But I think it's important to clarify for the benefit of your viewers that yesterday evening, Chebukati gave some clarifications, and I think I need to give two of them. One was that he made it clear that all the numbers are from the KIMS kits. None of the numbers has come from outside the KIMS kits. And the second thing he explained was that he gave a history, a chronology of the numbers that were generated, just to clarify and for Kenyans to avoid the conspiracy theory that had been building. And one of the things he said is that between 4 to 5 p.m., which is a very busy hour when a lot is happening, 17,000 KIMS kits transmitted data. This was the hour before the close of polling. 17,000 was slightly less than half of all the KIMS kits that had been applied or utilized in the general elections. So the figure of 4 million was taken from those 17,000 KIMS kits. And each KIMS kit is coded in with the total registered voters for that polling station, because each KIMS kit relates to a polling station. So he explained that those 4 million voters, which figures were transmitted by 17,000 KIMS kits, related to 9 million voters. So that is where the percentage of 48% came from. And he calls it a snapshot that came from half of the KIMS kits that managed to transmit between the hour of 4 and 5 p.m. He then says that by 10 p.m. the same day, the day of voting, 34,000 KIMS kits had transmitted. And from those 34,000 KIMS kits, there was a figure that he goes on to explain. I think it was something like 6.5 million votes. And he shows the percentage. Again, he explains the matter very clearly. And finally, he says after the addition, I think there were 2,000 additional KIMS kits had transmitted. The figures were clear, 7.5 million voters. One may disagree with him. One may say that he's misleading Kenyans, that there was some inflation. But he has explained himself. What I think we should not do is misrepresent his own statements. That's number one. Number two, I was an observer on 26th of October, and I was actually quite taken aback when I noticed that in all the polling stations I visited in 3 constituencies in Nairobi County, there was only one agent, and that was the agent of the Jubilee Party. And for me, this immediately showed that there will be one less opportunity for that cross verification where you have competitors observing the same election. So unfortunately, you have a situation where Jubilee are extremely confident about the numbers because their agents were there. They observed the numbers adding up. They were there during the counting. And then you have the other side, which is NASA, which is totally lacking confidence in the numbers because their agents were not there. And they're depending on anecdotal evidence, what they saw about lengths of queues and so on. I personally, when I visited the NSSF grounds at the time of tallying, was shocked to find that there were 300 on average people who had voted in those tents, those polling stations, because there didn't seem to be any queues. And yet this was a very open place with very many people of different ethnicities. It was not possible to inflate the numbers. And that is why we need to start reflecting on queuing theory and how it was possible for queues to be processed faster while giving the appearance there are very little voters, but maybe they were a bit more. Of course, the number was deflated from 8th of August significantly. Those are issues that we need to take into account. And I think ultimately, the KIMS kits are meant to transmit data every 3 hours or so. So for those who really doubt what is in the KIMS kits, they have one recourse: to go to court, challenge the KIMS kit, and then get the data of the transmissions that was happening every 3 hours. Because it is possible that there was inflation in some places. And I personally, when I studied the results, for example, of Garissa County, I noted some polling stations where it was clear that somebody had inflated numbers. And you can tell by looking at the patterns in a few polling stations.
Right.
Those polling stations may add up to 10,000 votes, 15,000 votes. But the question of a systematic inflation is one that cannot be answered extensively and positively by anyone on this panel.
Right, and this is just on the numbers issue. We have a lot of things to cover tonight. Let me just give the chance to Olga and Gabriel to make their very quick contributions on this issue of numbers.
On the numbers issue, I'm happy that even Kajama has noticed and admits that Chebukati has been contradicting himself. He actually said before elections that there is no need to go to these elections when he knows that the credibility cannot be ensured and assured. And he confirmed himself. He has not been able to demonstrate any credibility of these elections. And I don't even want to waste my time on discussing these numbers and these figures. Kanjama, if someone was to go to court, truly there would be no transmission of results that went through KIMS kit. Just like it happened on the 8th of August. These people did not use the KIMS kit. I talked to some of our governors from Wajir, from Turkana, who are on the ground, and they are certain that there was not just no voting, but KIMS kits were not used. So I don't even want to waste time on numbers that were not there, because I don't want to join in the lie and the stories of Chebukati that do not have a beginning, neither do they have an end.
Gabriel?
And Linus, that's the problem I'm having. That's the problem I'm having. You cannot delegitimize numbers that you do not know where they came from. You can't. It's like me saying I don't trust the numbers in those schemes, and you've heard Scheaffer saying that she believes very well that the numbers that we saw never came from the KIMS kits. I started by telling you about the great Roman emperor who said, if you for sure know it's not true, don't speak it. And that's what we've just done here. We've talked untruth yet again. Olga just told us when she began that she went around through the whole county. Was it the whole county or the whole country?
No.
The whole county? You jumped around? No, you just said by Kiambu. You mentioned several places. But Kiambu returned 900 plus. What we should be asking is, how did this process move quickly? And there is a reason as to that. How did it happen? Number one, it was only one vote that people were going through. And by the way, purposely, they were just voting probably for 1%. The others did not even amount about 2%. They amounted about 2%. Uhuru was elected by 98%. So if we are questioning numbers, like Wakili Kanjama has said, the best place to start questioning these numbers is through the courts. So I find it a little bit off and actually untruth when we say we have 20% just because CNN said so. Yet we have a Kenyan media house that traversed 290 constituencies plus, almost all, apart from the ones that you had violence. And they brought about near numbers as the one we saw. So why are we not questioning that media house?
Right, and indeed, there'll be many questions right here as the panel discusses the events around the election that was held on the 26th. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been declared re-elected again by the IEBC with 7.4 million votes, constituting about 98.27% of the valid votes cast. We are taking a short break. Don't go away.